Hey everyone, last chapter, chapter 9. Well, last chapter for this part of the course. Of course, you will continue on in the next part of the course and continue learning about psychology. This is going to be the last topic we're going to hit here. And to some extent, it begins a transition of a sort, I guess. Just to kind of get your mind about the future of the course a little bit. We've really been thinking about ourselves as kind of individuals and thinking about our brain, our sensory systems, our memories, our consciousness. Language, of course, is something we use to connect with other individuals. And as you go through the course, the level of analysis is going to get a little higher. You're going to learn about things like social psychology, which is explicitly, how humans affect each other. So how our social world affects who we are and how we act. You'll learn about individual differences, what makes one human different from another, and you'll probably talk about that in contexts like intelligence and personality. And of course, you're going to get into therapeutic aspects near the end of the course as well. So it's going to get more society level, let's say, whereas we've been much more individual level. This is kind of the transition between the two, and it's kind of interesting that way. So we're going to really focus on language in this chapter, and for good reason. When people talk about how are humans different from animals, what makes us distinct from animals, there's a few things people point out. One thing which is kind of ominous is some people say we might be the only animal that understands one day that we will die. Every other animal may not know that. And how does that change the way you live? It probably is the reason why things like religion came to be. Religion is, in many cases, an escape from death, right? An alternative approach to believing you will die one day, which is much more existentialism. But how does that profoundly change the way you live, knowing that one day you're going to die? There's also the notion, by the way, given we did the learning chapter, that some people will say that animals live very much in the present, and the consequences and such that shape their behavior are the ones that happen immediately after they do something. Whereas you or I can be motivated by future consequences down the road. You might choose to stop smoking because you don't want to die of lung cancer. Smart decision, by the way. It's a horrible way to die. But that's a consequence way down the road, right? You might try to do well in this class because you want to get a good mark, because you want to get a good cumulative GPA, because you want to get a good job, because you want to get paid a lot of money. And so you're looking, all the way down the road, and things that rewards that could come way down the road might influence you. They don't influence animals so much. It's the things right around the corner. But when you think about, virtually any of these things, death or rewards down the road, how do we know about rewards or punishments that wait us down the road? Well, we know because of our ability to communicate with one another, an ability that we have that is far more complex than that which any other animal has. That's what we're going to talk about, human language. Let's jump in. So first of all, let's be clear. Animals have a form of language. Animals can communicate. Often their communication is done a lot more with their bodies, not exclusively, but let's start there. This dog, if I show you this dog right here, if that dog was in front of you doing that and making a grrr noise, it's obvious what he's saying. He's saying, back off, dude. I don't like you in my face. I want you further away from me. And we can sense that, we can read that, and we intuitively would back off, right? And so he's giving us a command, but he's doing it with his body. They can do more than that, of course. Dogs can do more than that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, not just dogs. Lots of animals can do more than that. They can even understand language to some extent, but they don't use it as richly as we do. So we're going to come back to that point. But let me just start here. I want you to really appreciate what human language does for us. It allows us to transport across space and time. It sounds like sci-fi, like there's a wormhole between us and, well, mostly the past, not so much the future. But we do have a wormhole to the past, and we have a wormhole to other locations, and that is language. In fact, right here through the communication that's happening here, some of you are probably listening to this in Hong Kong. I know quite a few of you are there, or various other places around the world, and you're able to learn from me at great physical distance because of language. We can communicate via language. In fact, you can learn from Albert Einstein today if you would like. You just have to go to a library or find something that he's written online, and Albert will speak to you. He's dead. That doesn't stop a human being from communicating and teaching. In fact, thanks to all these videos, I could be teaching for years after I'm dead. Maybe right now you're listening to me and maybe I'm dead. I mean, I'm not, but maybe I am. That shows you how I can be in two places at one time, or not be in two places at one time, as the case may be. That's what language does for us, and it's very powerful when you really think of what that is. In fact, there's three things that people often say are the reasons why we are dominating in the planet, even though we are not physically very tough. We could not handle a bear or a shark, or there's a tiger. There's all sorts of animals that could take us down quite easily. But nonetheless, we're dominating the planet. Why? People say, well, our bipedalism was a big deal when we learned to stand on our feet, stand on our back legs, and suddenly our hands are free for tool use and all sorts of things, right? So we have two hands, very powerful things that we can use to do stuff with. Our frontal cortex, which is bigger than any other animal, we know it's developed a lot, and that's where we do all our strategic thought and planning and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what we can figure out what to do with these two hands. What can we use these for? We could throw stones, or maybe we could make a bow and arrow, or maybe a spear that's better than any other. And so tool use, tools start to be conceived of, they start to be used. People point to that quite a bit. But this third one is language. And, the idea is just this. Language allows you to transmit learning in a very powerful way. You don't have to go through Pavlovian conditioning or, operant conditioning. You don't need to go into some situation and, you don't even need to eat that poisonous thing once, even though you'll learn if you eat it once. But you could have somebody as part of your tribe say, hey, don't eat that. Joe ate that, and he was like sick for a week. You don't want to eat that, and so, okay, good. I won't eat it, and you don't even have to have that learning experience. So it makes us super efficient at working with ideas in creative and clever ways and transmitting learning. And that's probably why we have cities and cars and all this kind of stuff that most of the animals in the animal kingdom don't have. Language, a really rich, sophisticated language system, is key to all that. Okay. Now, this is getting back to the issue that, there's different ways of thinking about language. And this is an important theme that'll go through the chapter. So I just wanted to kind of get you with it early. So many animals, like dogs, do have parts of what we have. So, for example, receptive language abilities. Human dogs. Dogs can understand human language pretty well. They can come to learn what words mean. There's a video here in the chapter of a dog named Chaser, who I think knows 1,000 different toys and what they're called. So you can just say, hey, go give me the G.I. Joe. And he'll go into his pile of 1,000 toys and bring out the G.I. Joe. He knows which one you mean. So he can recognize a lot of words. My dog can certainly recognize a lot of words. If you have a dog, they know the word walk. They know the word treat. They often know the word bad. They go right down into a sad looking thing when you say bad. So there's quite a few words that your average dog knows. I would guess your average dog knows 10 or 12 words. But the thing here is it's just responding to a word, right? If you speak a sentence to a dog can understand a sentence. In fact, one of the things they teach you when it comes to training a dog is to learn that when a dog's not doing what you want it to do, you should say no and take control, and that's it. You shouldn't say, Oh, why are you always tugging towards those other dogs? You always tug towards this other dog, and I can't do whatever. And if you're just rambling on like that, your dog's like, you're just like, there's some sing song going on, and your dog's looking at you thinking, you're out of control. You're neurotic, man. I'm not listening to you. But if you say no in a strong way and take control, the dog can get to know that that word no is telling it to cease and desist what it's doing and to come into line with you. And so with a dog, in fact, less words is more. They can understand a brief little word quite well, and they can learn a lot of short, command kinds of words. Um, do they speak? Well, they kind of speak. I can tell you this: when we leave our dog home alone and then come back, she gives us crap. She's giving a real hard time, like really like right up the one side of us and down the other for a while. That's the only time she ever does it. So she only does it when she's annoyed that we've left her alone. She voices her annoyance. Well, you'll see in the textbook there's an elephant who can say a few words in Korean, I believe it was. He had learned to mimic some words and maybe even learned what they meant as they go. And he can actually say, like, I think it was 8 or 10 words. Again, individual words, okay? Scientists are not that impressed when animals learn individual words. In fact, you're going to see we're going to talk about some experiments where they've tried to train chimpanzees to use American Sign Language or great apes. And they can learn to use symbols to represent things they want. If they want orange juice, they can sign to you, orange, give me orange juice. But again, tends to be single words, maybe 2 words sort of together. It was a big deal once when a chimpanzee saw a duck landing on the water, and he signed, I can't sign, but he signed water bird. And the people at the time thought he just created something. He created the term water bird, like a swan or a duck or something is a water bird. And other people said, no, I think he just said water bird. I don't think he was combining them. So it's that combining. It's that using language in a highly flexible and powerful way. That's when scientists get impressed. So they're not very impressed with animals' language abilities for the most part. Ants, by the way, communicate through smells in a ridiculous chemical communication that's just crazy. It's just so you just don't think this is the only way to communicate. They communicate through chemicals in a way that's like crazy. But we are the only ones that seem to have this abstract language system where we represent things that exist in the real world with words, but then we use those words in a very abstract way and a very creative way to sort of express ourselves like no other animal does. Okay, and so just to give you a sense of that complexity, here are 2 different examples that tie to what we're going to call surface versus deep structure. Okay, surface is when it sort of looks the same when you kind of see it, but deep is about what it means. So 2 things can look similar, but they can mean something very different. And here's an example of that. Joe took a bite out of his burger. Joe's burger took a bite out of his wallet. Okay, both of those look very similar in terms of the structure, but they mean something very different, right? One, Joe's eating the burger. The other one, the burger costs a lot of money, is what that basically says. It's nothing. Nobody's eating anybody, but we've used language in this creative way. Took a bite out of his wallet. We use that to imply that it cost a lot. And so again, we're really taking these words and we're using them creatively and loosely to represent things in kind of crazy ways, represent the fact that something's expensive with this phrase. Here's examples of 5 different surface sentences. They all kind of look different. The first 2 look pretty similar. Next 2 look kind of similar to each other, but to some extent they look a little different on the surface, but they all pretty much mean the same thing. Steve likes music. Steve enjoys music. Music is one of Steve's hobbies. Music is Steve's favorite thing. Steve thinks music is fantastic. All these different ways of essentially saying the same thing. This is what we do not see animals doing. Okay, they are not combining things. They can learn individual elements quite well, but they are not combining things to communicate in complex and rich ways. Like Joe's burger took a bite out of his wallet. That's a pretty complex, rich sentence that you really have to understand language to even know what it means. That's the kind of language that's uniquely human. That's the kind of language that'll be the focus of most of this chapter. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of set that up and have you, first of all, appreciating what we mean when we say language, but secondly, to have you really appreciating how important our language, our linguistic abilities are to us as human beings. I said that when it was memory, how important your memory is to defining you. But language as a species, language has been the critical thing that has allowed us to rise to the level we've risen. So I hope you enjoy learning about it as we go through the rest of this chapter. Oh, I'm back. I forgot about this slide. So we're not quite going yet. I want to do this slide. I haven't read the whole chapter yet. I've read chapters like it, and I bet I know where it's going to go. But I want to put something in your head as you read this. And again, I always love trying to connect the various things we've been talking about to get you seeing those connections across stuff. So, language and consciousness. Remember, with consciousness, working memory, we said there's a voice in the head, the phonological loop, and we kind of think of working memory as where our consciousness exists. There are many chapters, and we'll see if this is one of them, where they claim that language and consciousness co-developed and that they're reflections of the same thing, so to speak. And then so one of the reasons they'll claim that some animals don't have rich language is because they don't have a rich conscious experience like us. This is one reason people decide it's okay to do nasty things to them. I never quite understood that, why an organism with a poorer consciousness is that it's okay to be unethical towards it. But that's what some people think. I want you to realize it's maybe more complex than that. So I want to tell you a little story, and this is honestly what I think is the case, but this is me. This is me speculating based on what I know of psychology. But if we think about how did language evolve, and where did consciousness come into the picture, and what does learning have anything to do with it? I think learning and the advantages of learning that consciousness brings, the advantages to learning that consciousness brings, and then the advantages that come when you can communicate your consciousness are all sort of steps in a process. So let me describe to you that process. So let's imagine here we have a mother and a baby deer, and they're thirsty. And so the mother, there's a watering hole somewhere, and the mother kind of noticed it on the way. They don't usually go to that watering hole, but the mother decided to bring this deer to this watering hole. This is a sad story, I'm afraid to tell you. And so let's say they go to the watering hole, and this deer gets attacked. The baby deer gets attacked by a predator and taken away, and the baby deer is no more. Okay. If we think of this in operant conditioning terms, this was one trial, right? This deer took its baby to the watering hole, and it was attacked, and the baby disappeared. And assuming the mother liked the baby, which we assume is true, what would this be? Negative punishment, right? Because something was taken away that she liked, and it's punishment because it's a negative overall. It's a bad thing that happened. And so, okay, the animal might learn from that, okay? But that was just one trial. So sometimes it takes a lot of trials for an animal to learn something. So, if that was all there was, the mother might take another baby to that watering hole again. Like, she might take a number of trials before she's learned that's a dangerous watering hole. Unless maybe this is where conscious experience comes in. So this is one of the things I think. I think consciousness evolved primarily to support conscious memory. And we talked about conscious memory quite a bit in the last chapter. And I think what conscious memory does is it allows an animal to multiply a learning experience. Even though this is a negative example, if this mama deer now keeps remembering that, if in her mind she keeps replaying this act, an episodic memory of going to that watering hole and having her fawn taken, we might call that grief, right? In our modern terms, reliving that terrible event over and over again. And we know people do that when a child dies in some way they think could have been preventable after the fact. But maybe that grief, maybe that replaying of the event is multiplying the learning episode. It's not, I mean, yes, she just did this once, but she's then replayed it over and over. And every time she replays it, it's like a learning episode. And so maybe conscious memory, the evolution of conscious memory, allowed an animal to learn more quickly. That alone would be a huge evolutionary benefit, right? So I'm okay thinking, okay, this animal has that ability, that conscious ability of reliving things, and that alone will let it learn faster, and that's good. We can imagine another step the animal might take, and that is, and this is where we are, and I don't think deers are really here. If they could communicate this memory to others in their group, if they could say, hey, you know, that watering hole, there's a nasty predator over there, don't go near that watering hole, then not only is the learning multiplied for them, but it can be spread to others in their social connected group, right? And so this is why I see these as two distinct things. I think conscious experience evolved to serve the individual and evolved to help them learn better, and then got extended to other kind of uses. Whereas I think language is the ability to share our consciousness with other individuals. And in my opinion, it's perfectly reasonable to assume that a lot of animals possess conscious experience, but don't have the ability to share it with the richness we do. That is, that they kind of stop here. You know, they have the conscious experience and the benefits that comes with it, but they might not have the ability to share their conscious experience. It might be a much more private conscious experience. So in my opinion, these two consciousness may have developed before language, and the lack of language does not imply a lack of consciousness. Again, just to connect all these things up that you've been thinking about and learning about, and to kind of set you up as you think through the rest of this language chapter. So now I'm serious. I hope you go and enjoy that language chapter. I will pop up every now and then. Okay.